A girl alone in the wilderness, a fire closing in fast, and a decision that would defy generations of hatred. This isn't just a rescue, it's the beginning of something far greater than either of them imagined. What happens when an act of courage challenges everything a community believes? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The harsh summer sun beat down on the Texas plains as 16-year-old Catherine Miller wiped sweat from her brow. The journey west had been arduous, but her father's determination to start anew after her mother's passing had brought them to this frontier outpost in 1858. Their small cabin stood at the edge of settlement territory, a precarious position that her father insisted offered the best land for farming. "Catherine, fetch more water before sundown," her father called as he repaired the fence damaged in last night's windstorm, "and stay within sight of the cabin." "Yes, Pa," she replied, taking the wooden bucket. Catherine's golden hair was tied back with a faded blue ribbon, her mother's last gift. Her dress, once vibrant blue, had faded to a pale shade after months of washing in harsh lye soap. As she walked to the creek, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Tensions between settlers and the Comanche had escalated in recent months. Just last week, Mr. Peterson from 2 miles east had encountered warriors marking their traditional hunting grounds at the creek. Catherine knelt and dipped the bucket into the cool water. A reflection appeared beside her own dark eyes in a copper-skinned face. She gasped and spun around, but no one was there. Heart pounding, she hurried back to the cabin. "Pa, I think I saw someone at the creek," she said breathlessly. James Miller set down his tools and peered toward the tree line. "Probably just shadows playing tricks. But best stay inside now. I'll finish up here." That night, Catherine lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. The wind howled around their cabin's corners, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. But there was something else, the faint sound of horses moving across the plains. "Just travelers on the main trail," she whispered to herself. Though the main trail was miles away, morning brought an uneasy calm. Her father left at dawn to trade with other settlers at the small outpost 10 miles east, promising to return before nightfall. "Bar the door behind me," he instructed. "I should be back by sundown." As the day wore on, Catherine tended to her chores. She kneaded dough for bread, swept the packed earth floor, and mended a tear in her father's shirt. The afternoon brought dark clouds and the distant rumble of thunder. "Pa will be caught in the storm," she worried aloud. The rain came suddenly and violently, hammering against the cabin's roof. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by deafening thunder. Catherine jumped at each crack, her nerves already frayed from days of feeling unseen eyes upon her. As dusk approached with no sign of her father, Catherine lit the oil lamp and placed it in the window, a beacon to guide him home through the storm. The rain finally subsided, but the wind remained fierce, howling through the trees surrounding their isolated homestead. A crash outside sent her heart racing. "Pa," she called, but received no answer. Moving cautiously toward the window, Catherine peered into the gathering darkness. Another crash, this time against the side of the cabin. "Who's there?" she called, trying to keep her voice steady. Only the wind answered, but then came the unmistakable smell of smoke. Catherine flung open the door to see flames licking up the side of the cabin where lightning had struck a nearby tree, igniting the dry brush piled against the cabin wall. Catherine grabbed a blanket and tried to beat out the flames, but the fire spread too quickly, feeding on the cabin's dry timber. Smoke filled the small space as she backed away, coughing violently. The flames blocked the door, her only escape route. Trapped and desperate, Catherine pressed herself against the far wall as the fire consumed the cabin. The heat was unbearable, smoke burning her lungs with each breath. Darkness edged her vision as she slid to the floor, consciousness fading. Through the roaring flames, she heard a new sound, the thundering of hooves approaching fast. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was of her father, returning too late to save her. Running Bear had not intended to venture so close to the white settlers' lands. As a respected warrior of the Comanche, he knew the dangers that came with crossing into territories now claimed by the pale-skinned newcomers. But something had drawn him to this particular stretch of creek for 3 days, now a feeling he couldn't explain to his fellow hunters. "The spirits guide me here," he had told his cousin Nightwolf when they separated earlier that day. Night Wolf had merely nodded, knowing better than to question when Running Bear spoke of spiritual matters not at 20 summers. Running Bear had already earned his place among the tribe's warriors. His keen eyes spotted the cabin girl days ago, a pale thing with hair the color of prairie grass in late summer. He had watched her from afar, curious about the isolated dwelling and its inhabitants. The white settlers usually clustered together, but this cabin stood alone, vulnerable. The storm had driven him to seek shelter in a stand of oak trees half a mile from the cabin. As lightning split the sky, he witnessed the strike that set the dry brush ablaze. At first, he told himself it was not his concern. The whites had brought much suffering to his people, pushing them from ancestral hunting grounds, breaking treaties as easily as twigs underfoot. Yet when no one emerged from the burning structure, something stirred within him. He remembered his grandfather's teachings. A warrior's strength is measured not only by his enemies defeated, but by the lives he chooses to save. Without further hesitation, Running Bear mounted his painted stallion and rode hard toward the cabin, the rain pelting his bare chest and face. As he approached, he could see flames consuming the small dwelling, black smoke billowing into the night sky. He circled the structure once, seeking an entry point. The main door was engulfed in flames, but a small window on the side offered possibility. Tying his horse to a nearby post, Running Bear wrapped his leather shirt around his arm and smashed through the window, ignoring the glass that cut his skin. Inside, the heat was oppressive, the smoke thick and choking. Crouching low, he navigated through the burning interior until he spotted her. The golden-haired girl collapsed on the floor, unconscious. In one fluid motion, he lifted her slight form and turned back toward the window, now their only escape. Cabin groaned around them, timbers cracking as the structure began to collapse. Running Bear pushed through the broken window, carefully maneuvering Catherine's limp body. Through the opening seconds before the roof caved in behind them, in the clearing before the burning cabin, he laid her gently on the ground. Her face was smudged with soot, her breathing shallow. Running Bear pressed his ear to her chest, relieved to hear her heart still beating. He cupped his hands, collecting rainwater from a nearby barrel that had survived the fire, and gently moistened her parched lips. Catherine's eyes fluttered open, wide with confusion and fear when they focused on the Comanche warrior kneeling beside her. She tried to scramble away, but weakness overcame her, and she collapsed back onto the damp earth. "No harm," Running Bear said in halting English he had learned from traders. "Fire bad, you safe now." Catherine coughed violently, expelling smoke from her lungs. When she could finally speak, her voice was raspy. "You ... saved me." Running Bear nodded once, his expression solemn. He pointed to the burning ruins of the cabin. "Home gone, we're family." "My father," Catherine gasped, suddenly remembering. "He went to the trading post. He should have been back by now." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at the destroyed cabin, everything they owned reduced to cinders. The sound of approaching horses caught Running Bear's attention. His body tensed, hand moving instinctively to the knife at his waist. Catherine heard it too, hope flaring in her eyes. "Pa," she called weakly, but the riders who emerged from the darkness weren't her father. 3 men on horseback approached, rifles ready. Running Bear recognized them as white settlers from a nearby homestead. "Get away from her, savage," the lead rider shouted, aiming his rifle at Running Bear's chest. "No!" Catherine cried, finding strength to sit up. "He saved me. The cabin caught fire in the storm. I was trapped inside." The men exchanged skeptical glances, rifles still trained, on the Comanche warrior who stood tall, unflinching under their hostile gaze. "More likely he set the fire himself," one of the men spat. "Probably planning to take you back to his camp." "That's not true," Catherine protested. But her words were drowned out by a new arrival, her father, riding hard into the clearing. Face contorted with anguish at the sight of his burning home, James Miller leapt from his horse, rushing to his daughter's side. "Catherine, dear God, are you hurt?" "I'm all right, Pa," she assured him, grasping his hands. "But our home ... Her voice trailed off as she looked at the smoldering ruins. "None of that matters as long as you're safe," her father said, embracing her tightly. Then his gaze fell on Running Bear, standing silently nearby. "Who is this?" Before Catherine could explain, one of the settlers interrupted. "Found this Comanche with your daughter. Claims he pulled her from the fire, but you know how they lie." "James." Miller studied the warrior's face, noting the cuts on his arms and the singed edges of his leather leggings. Then he looked at his daughter questioningly. "He saved my life, Pa," Catherine said firmly. "I was trapped inside when the lightning struck. He broke through the window and carried me out before the roof collapsed." A tense silence followed as James Miller weighed his daughter's words against his own deep-seated distrust of the Comanche, people who had raided settlements throughout the territory. Finally, he stood and approached Running Bear. "You saved my daughter?" he asked, his voice gruff but no longer hostile. Running Bear nodded once. "Fire spirit angry tonight. Take home that girl." James Miller extended his hand slowly. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay." The other settlers muttered disapprovingly, but James silenced them with a stern look. "This man saved my Catherine. In my book, that makes him welcome at my fire any time, redskin or not." Running Bear regarded the offered hand for a long moment before clasping it briefly. Then he turned to retrieve his horse, preparing to depart. "Wait," Catherine called. "What's your name?" The warrior paused. "I am called Running Bear." "Thank you, Running Bear," she said softly. "I won't forget what you did tonight." As Running Bear mounted his stallion, James Miller called out, "The Army Patrol reports Comanche hunting parties moving north. It's not safe for you here." Running Bear's expression remained impassive, but he inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement before disappearing into the darkness, leaving Catherine staring after him, wondering if their paths would ever cross again. 2 weeks passed since the fire. The Miller family had taken shelter with the Petersons, whose homestead lay 2 miles east. James worked from dawn till dusk, determined to rebuild their cabin before the first autumn chill. Catherine helped Mrs. Peterson with household chores during the day, but her thoughts often drifted to Running Bear. The memory of his stoic face, illuminated by firelight, remained vivid in her mind. Each night, she found herself gazing toward the western plains, wondering where he might be. "You're mighty distracted these days," Mrs. Peterson observed one afternoon as they hung laundry. "Still thinking about that cabin fire?" "Sometimes," Catherine admitted, not sharing the true direction of her thoughts. Most settlers viewed the Comanche with fear and hatred. Even her father, despite his gratitude, had cautioned her not to speak of Running Bear in town. "Indians are seen as enemies here," he had explained. "Even one who did a good deed won't be welcomed by most folks." That evening, as Catherine carried water from the creek, she noticed fresh hoofprints in the mud, not the familiar pattern of settler horses, but the unshod prints of a native pony. Her heart quickened as she scanned the tree line, but saw nothing. Returning to the Peterson home, she found Mr. Peterson and her father in serious conversation on the porch. "Army patrol came through this morning," Mr. Peterson was saying. "There's been trouble north of here." A Comanche raiding party hit the Wilkins place. Took their horses, burned the barn. Anyone hurt? Her father asked. Wilkins took an arrow in the shoulder, but he'll live. Army's organizing a militia to push the Comanche back beyond the river. They're recruiting every able man. Catherine sat down her water bucket, a sense of dread washing over her. You're not joining them, are you? James Miller looked at his daughter with troubled eyes. They're passing through tomorrow. I haven't decided. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. The thought of her father riding out with men intent on driving away, or worse, killing people like Running Bear filled her with anguish. She slipped outside into the cool night air, seeking solace in the star-filled sky. A soft nickering from the tree line froze her in place. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, Running Bear, leading his painted stallion. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, as if unsure of his welcome. Catherine glanced back at the darkened house, then walked cautiously toward him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "It's dangerous." "I watch. Make sure you're safe," he replied in his limited English. "New home good?" "We're staying with friends until Pa rebuilds our cabin," she explained. Then, urgently, "There's trouble. Army patrols are everywhere, and they're forming a militia against your people." Running Bear's expression hardened. "Not my people cause trouble. Different band from north. But white eyes see all Comanche same. You need to go back to your tribe." "Warn them," Catherine insisted. He shook his head. "My tribe already moved north, away from settlers. I stay watch over you. Owe debt to Fire Spirit that spared you." "You don't owe me anything," Catherine protested. "You already saved my life." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the Petersons' door opening. James Miller stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, scanning the darkness. "Catherine?" he called. She turned back to Running Bear. "Go quickly." But before he could retreat, James spotted them. He approached cautiously, rifle ready but not aimed. "Sir," Running Bear greeted him respectfully, standing his ground. James Miller studied the young warrior for a long moment. "You're taking a big risk coming here." "He came to make sure we were safe, Pa," Catherine explained. James sighed heavily. "You picked a bad time for a social call, Running Bear. There's a militia forming. Any Indian found this side of the river is likely to be shot on sight. My people not responsible for attacks," Running Bear stated firmly. "Northern band, led by Broken Horn. They break away, reject peace talks." James considered this information. "That may be, but it won't matter to the militia. You need to clear out of this territory." A dog barked in the distance, followed by the sound of approaching riders. James tensed, looking toward the road. "Night patrol," he muttered. "They've been checking homesteads after dark." He turned to Running Bear. "You need to go, now." Running Bear hesitated, looking at Catherine. Something unspoken passed between them. Concern, perhaps even affection. "I'll be fine," she assured him. "Please go." With a quick nod to James, Running Bear mounted his horse and disappeared into the darkness just as lantern light appeared. On the road, two riders approached, one in an army uniform, the other a local settler Catherine recognized as Mr. Dawson. "Evening, Miller," the soldier called. "Everything quiet here?" "Just getting some air with my daughter," James replied calmly. "Any news from up north?" "Patrol caught a Comanche scout near Watson's Creek," Dawson said. "Army's questioning him about the raiding parties." Catherine felt her blood run cold. She glanced at her father, who maintained his composed expression. "You folks seen anything unusual?" the soldier asked. "Nothing," James said firmly. "Though I'd appreciate knowing if there's real danger. My daughter and I are vulnerable until our new cabin is built. That's why we're forming the militia," Dawson explained. "Meeting tomorrow at noon in town. We could use a good shot like you." "Miller." After the patrol departed, Catherine turned to her father. "You can't join them, Pa. Running Bear's people aren't the ones causing trouble. James ran a hand through his graying hair. It's not that simple, Catherine. I have to protect you, protect our future here. And what about protecting the innocent? She challenged. Running Bear saved my life. His people shouldn't suffer for something they didn't do. Her father had no immediate answer. They returned to the house in silence, each troubled by the choices that lay ahead. The following morning, Catherine helped Mrs. Peterson prepare breakfast, her mind still troubled by the night's events. Through the window, she noticed her father. In deep conversation with Mr. Peterson by the barn. When James came in for breakfast, his expression was resolute. "I've made my decision," he announced. "I'm riding into town, but not to join the militia. There's an Indian agent passing through. A man named Davis who's trying to negotiate peace with the friendly tribes. I'm going to tell him what Running Bear told us about the separate northern band." Catherine's relief was palpable. "Thank you, Pa. Don't thank me yet," he cautioned. "One settler's word may not count for much, but I have to try." As James prepared to leave, Catherine hugged him tightly. "Be careful." "Always he assured her. "Stay close to the house today." But as her father's figure disappeared down the dusty road, Catherine couldn't ignore the growing sense that the fragile peace was about to shatter, with Running Bear caught in the middle. The afternoon stretched endlessly as Catherine waited for her father's return. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising another summer storm. Mrs. Peterson noticed her restlessness and attempted to distract her with baking, but Catherine's thoughts remained fixed on the meeting in town. "Your father's a sensible man," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "He won't let hot-headed folks push him into something foolish." "It's not Pa I'm worried about," Catherine replied softly. By mid-afternoon, the storm clouds had darkened the sky prematurely. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a warning of the deluge to come. Mr. Peterson came in from the fields, concern etched on his weathered face. "Storm's coming fast," he observed. "James should have been back by now." His words only heightened Catherine's anxiety. She moved to the window, straining to see through the gathering gloom. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering against the roof like impatient fingers. "There's riders coming," Mr. Peterson announced, peering through the downpour. "A whole group of them." Catherine's heart leapt, hoping to see her father among them. But as the riders drew closer, she recognized the blue uniforms of army soldiers, mixed with civilian militia members. They rode with purpose, faces grim beneath rain-soaked hats. Mr. Peterson stepped onto the porch to meet them, shotgun held casually at his side. Catherine followed, shielding her eyes against the rain. "Afternoon, Peterson," the lead soldier called. "We're tracking a Comanche spotted near Creighton's Creek this morning. Trail leads this way." "Haven't seen any Indians," Peterson replied. "Just my family and the Millers here." A militia member pushed forward, Dawson, the man from last night's patrol. "We have reason to believe he might have been heading for this homestead." Catherine felt her breath catch. "Were they tracking Running Bear? What makes you say that?" Peterson challenged. Another rider moved forward, and Catherine was relieved to see her father. James dismounted quickly, his expression troubled as he joined them on the porch. "Catherine, go inside," he said quietly. "What's happening, Pa?" she asked, not moving. Before he could answer, Dawson spoke up. "We caught that Comanche scout I mentioned." Before he escaped, he revealed there's been a warrior watching this area. "Seems he's taken a particular interest in your daughter, Miller." The accusation hung in the rain-soaked air. Catherine looked to her father, who placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "My daughter was saved from our burning cabin by a Comanche warrior," James stated firmly. "He's shown nothing but honor. If he's been watching over us, it's out of concern, not malice." "That's a mighty charitable view," the Army lieutenant remarked skeptically. "But we can't take chances with settler safety. If this Indian's in the area, we need to find him." "And do what?" Catherine asked, her voice stronger than she felt. Punish him for an act of kindness? The lieutenant studied her with surprise. Miss, these savages understand one thing: force. Any Comanche this side of the river is in violation of territorial boundaries. Those boundaries keep changing, James pointed out. The Indian agent Davis confirmed what I told you in town. The raiding parties are from a breakaway northern band. Punishing peaceful tribes will only push them toward violence too. The debate was interrupted by a shout from one of the militia members stationed at the edge of the property. Tracks here. Fresh ones, heading toward the creek. The lieutenant immediately ordered his men to remount. We'll continue this discussion later, Miller. Right now we've got an Indian to catch. As the soldiers prepared to depart, Catherine clutched her father's arm. Pa, they'll kill him if they find him. James Miller looked torn between his duty to community and his sense of honor. Finally, he turned to his daughter. Stay here with the Petersons. I'm going with them. At least I can try to ensure he's treated fairly if they capture him. I'm coming too, Catherine insisted. Absolutely not, her father replied sternly. It's too dangerous, but Catherine stood her ground. Running Bear saved my life. I won't hide while men hunt him down for it. After a tense moment, James relented. Stay close to me and do exactly as I say. They mounted up, James on his mare, Catherine riding double with him, and joined the patrol as it moved toward the creek. The rain had intensified, turning the ground treacherous and washing away tracks. The soldiers spread out, searching for signs of passage. Catherine's eyes scanned the landscape frantically, hoping to spot Running Bear before the soldiers did. The creek had swollen with rainwater, its usually gentle flow now a rushing torrent. A shout went up from the far bank. There he is! Catherine's heart sank as she saw Running Bear emerge from the tree line, mounted on his painted stallion. He froze momentarily upon seeing the soldiers, then turned his horse to flee. Halt! The lieutenant commanded, raising his rifle. Several militia members followed suit. No! Catherine cried, sliding from her father's horse despite his attempt to hold her back. She ran toward the creek, placing herself between the rifles and Running Bear. Don't shoot! Her sudden movement startled the soldiers. James quickly dismounted and rushed to his daughter's side, placing himself partially in front of her. Lower your weapons, he ordered. This man saved my daughter's life. The lieutenant hesitated, his rifle still raised. Stand aside, Miller. He's a Comanche warrior in restricted territory. Across the creek, Running Bear remained motionless, watching the confrontation unfold. He could have fled but chose to stay. If you want him, you'll have to go through us, James declared, his voice carrying over the rain. A tense standoff ensued, broken only by the arrival of a new rider, a man in formal attire despite the weather, wearing a badge of official capacity. What's happening here? He demanded, surveying the scene. Indian Agent Davis, the lieutenant acknowledged with reluctance. We're apprehending a Comanche warrior found in settler territory. Davis dismounted, approaching carefully. Is this the warrior you spoke of in town, Mr. Miller? The one who saved your daughter? It is, James confirmed. Running Bear. He's not part of the raiding parties. Davis studied Running Bear thoughtfully. I've been authorized by the governor to negotiate with peaceful Comanche bands. If this man is willing to serve as an intermediary, he could be valuable. The lieutenant lowered his rifle slightly. Sir, with all due respect, you can't trust. I'll be the judge of that, Lieutenant, Davis interrupted. He turned to Catherine. And James, your experience with this young man speaks well of his character. Would you vouch for him? Without hesitation, James replied firmly. Catherine stepped forward. Running Bear risked his life to save mine. He could have left me to die in that fire, but he didn't. If more people on both sides showed such courage, perhaps there wouldn't be so much bloodshed. Her words hung in the air, punctuated by thunder. Davis nodded thoughtfully, then addressed Running Bear directly. Would you be willing to help me speak with your people? To find a way toward peace? Running Bear considered the offer, his dark eyes moving from Davis to Catherine, then to James. Finally he spoke, his English careful but clear. My people wish no war. Want only to live as we always have. I will speak for peace, if whites listen truly. Davis smiled. That's all I ask. He turned to the lieutenant. Call off your men, Lieutenant. This man is now under my protection as a diplomatic envoy. The soldiers reluctantly lowered their weapons. The tension in the air dissipated slightly, replaced by an uneasy truce. As the group prepared to return to the Peterson homestead to discuss next steps, Running Bear guided his horse closer to where Catherine stood with her father. You stand between weapons and Running Bear, he said, genuine wonder in his voice. Why risk life for enemy? You're not my enemy, Catherine replied simply. You never were. Running Bear's stoic expression softened almost imperceptibly. Two peoples, much blood between, but perhaps. He glanced at Davis, then back to Catherine. Perhaps new path possible. James Miller extended his hand across the cultural divide once more. My home, when it's rebuilt, will always welcome you, Running Bear. The Comanche warrior clasped the offered hand. And my fire will welcome Miller family. As they rode back through the rain, Catherine felt a profound shift, not just in her own life, but perhaps in the larger story of two peoples whose destinies seemed eternally entwined in conflict. One act of courage in a burning cabin had created a small bridge across a vast divide. The storm began to subside, and through breaking clouds, a ray of sunlight illuminated the path ahead, uncertain, difficult, but somehow more hopeful than before.